Hey guys, welcome to my June wrap up. Usually I'm in front of the bookcase and I'm all cute and my lighting is beautiful and all that stuff. I'm just not feeling it today, y'all, and I really wanted to go ahead and get this video up. So welcome to your intro to my June wrap up. It is all vlog style, so like I don't have to talk here at the end for anything, but just wanted to give you a breakdown of the books that I have read in terms of like star ratings and formatting and that kind of thing. So this month I read 15 books, which is amazing. 3 of which were audiobooks, 12 were physical books. One of those physical books was a short story collection. So there's that. I read 2 5-star books, 5 4-star books, 5 3-star books, 2 2-star books, and 1 1-star book. So first 1-star of the year. So that's cool, I guess. And I'm going to stop talking now and let you just get into the vlog clips. Hey you guys, so I have some vloggy goodness for you right now in terms of like wrap up things. So I've already finished my first 2 books of June and y'all, it's not been good. First book, this is from my book of the month from April. So I'm proud of myself for reading a book of the month that fast. Isn't that bad? Then She Was Gone by Lisa Joel. This is, you know, standard thriller. You have a missing girl and stuff. This deals with the mother of the missing girl trying to like get her life back together and things like that. I gave this book 2 stars. I did not like it. I found it really predictable. I didn't really care about anything that was happening in the book. One of the things that Lisa Joel does a lot is like foreshadowing, and so she would say things and then it's like, oh, okay, so you just told us the reveal that you're going to do in the next like 2 chapters. So that's cool because now I don't care because now I already know. So it was one of those books. Didn't like it. Wouldn't recommend it. Sorry. Definitely this is going in the unhaul pile. I don't want it on my shelves. And the next book that I read is my first 1-star book of the year, The Chalk Man by CJ Tudor. Okay, so let's talk about this piece of trash. When you look at the description, it's like, oh, okay, for fans of Stephen King, right? Well, we all know that I love Stephen King, so I'm like, oh, okay. Stephen King himself recommended this. And let me tell you why it's garbage. Let me start off by saying that it is 100% okay for you to take inspiration from an author that you really love. It is not 100% okay to pretty much like rip off like whole plot points from his books, his or her books. So I got major it vibes from this when I first started reading it, which is fine. Like that's great because it's a fabulous book. However, let's talk about the similarities between this book and it. So number 1, you have a group of children. That's in a lot of books, right? Okay. So one of them is a girl, the only girl, who happens to have red hair. Hello, Beverly Marsh. They have a rock fight with some bullies. Hi, it. Oh. And then the biggest thing, I'm reading this, and the author actually uses the term deadlights, which made me literally screech and almost throw the book across the room because that comes straight out of the book, It. And again, like, I feel like that was taking it 1 step too far. So I'm like, were you just that flattered that you're like, oh, okay, yeah, I'll recommend this book, Mr. King. Like, that's a great idea. Secondary thing, there was also a scene within this that I won't talk about because it gets a little spoilery if for some reason you want to read this garbage book, but it is very reminiscent of a particular scene in Pet Sematary as well. So it's like, okay, once again, Mr. King, you recommended this to me, so I thought that it was going to be great. No. In addition to all of those issues, I didn't connect with any of the characters. I kind of saw what was coming like way in advance. And the last 2 pages just honestly pissed me off. I ended up hate reading this book. I got like probably a quarter of the way through it before I decided that I hated it. And I just had to keep reading because I was like, oh, okay, well, maybe it gets better. Nope, no, it didn't. So it's a piece of garbage. Don't read it. It's in my unhaul pile because it's a piece of garbage. And those are the only 2 books that I have finished so far. So that's all I got. I'll see you guys in the next clip. Hey, you guys. I'm here to talk about some books. I have 4 books that I need to talk about. And let's just jump right into it. First book I'm going to talk about, The Historian by Elizabeth Kostova. Finished this and I gave it 3 stars. It definitely isn't a bad book, but I found it to just be okay. It does have to do with the legend of like Vlad the Impaler and vampires and things like that. It's about a young girl who travels with her father who's like considered a scholar, and he starts like telling her these stories about like when he was younger and going through and researching the legend of Dracula and that kind of thing. So it's told through dual perspectives. You get the letters that he's writing her, which take place in the past, and the stories that he told her, which take place in the past, and then you have like her story and her journey and stuff. So obviously this book is pretty big. I feel like it could have been edited down a little bit. There were parts of the book that I was like, do we really need to go over this? Like, I found it to be dragging a little bit, and I just didn't really feel like there was enough action for me to really drag the plot. A lot of it was, well, we went this place, and then we went this place, and then we did some research, and then, you know, this person showed up, and you know, that kind of thing. And it just, I don't know, I just didn't really feel like that was enough to make me continue to care and really like propel the plot forward. And I really kind of felt like some of the characters were really underdeveloped as well. So because of that, it was really hard for me to stay engaged. The high point of this book was there was like a romance element between one of the characters, Paul, and another character, and that was about it. Well, I mean, it's not that I didn't enjoy it. Like I said, I didn't hate it, but it wasn't great. It wasn't what I was expecting it to be, and I just didn't love it, so I gave it 3 stars. So the next thing that I ended up listening to on audio was Kill Creek. It's by Scott Thomas, and it's not necessarily your basic haunted house story. You're taking 4 authors, horror authors actually, from like various subgenres. They all write horror, but they all write very different kinds of horror, and they're being interviewed in this supposedly very famous haunted house. I didn't really know much about this book going into it. I went in really blind, and I think that's one of the reasons that I enjoyed it as much as I did. Of course, with like any haunted house book, you're gonna end up in like trope territory because it's kind of impossible not to. But I feel like the way that this was written, it was written with like a freshness that I really enjoyed. Like, again, not that the content was fresh, but I think that the writing was good enough so that I didn't mind those points that were a little bit tropey. And he had some really excellent characters, and like the character dynamic between the group of people that were in this house was excellently written, and that part I thought was one of the strongest points of the whole book. And I actually didn't know that this was his debut novel, and so I think for it being a debut novel, like, he did a very good job. I would say that the biggest drawback for me was probably the foreshadowing that was used throughout the book. Now, of course, you're always going to use foreshadowing, like that's a thing. It's a literary device that has to be used. But it was one of those that it was so painfully obvious that it made you just roll your eyes like so far back in your head. It's like, okay, well, you literally just told me what's going to happen. Why did you do that? Like, can you leave me to be surprised? That's kind of what happens a lot of times in a lot of thrillers that I've read. So that was probably the thing that I disliked the most, you know, and there were just a couple of other things here and there that I didn't super care for, but, you know, not enough to draw a low rating. So like I said, I ended up rating it 4 stars, and I really liked it. I don't know if he has any other books out, but he's an author that I would definitely read more from in the future. Next book is Black Mad Wheel. This is by Josh Malerman. So I had really high hopes going into this, and I gotta say I was disappointed, unfortunately. So if you know anything about Bird Box kind of dealt with like a threat that you couldn't really see, and I won't go, you know, into anything other than that. This one actually deals with like an auditory threat. So you have a group of people who are in the army, and they were never actually like soldiers. They were in the army band, and they had to go to Africa because they're like searching for the source of like this auditory threat, and nobody knows what it does, and you know, that kind of shit. So I would say at this point, like, Malerman is like really good at like sensory horror and that kind of thing. And overall, there were like some bits in this book that were like really suspenseful and very atmospheric. But aside from that, this book was it was a bit of a letdown, honestly. The plot really left something to be desired for me, and it was almost like he was torn between whether he wanted to focus on the plot or if he wanted the book to be like entirely character driven, and you need to choose one or do both well, and he didn't do that here because it's not a long book. And there was this like romance element in it that felt really forced that I didn't really care for. I don't know, I was expecting so much more from this after reading Bird Box, but I do know that his next novel, Unburied Carol, which is on my shelf, had like really high ratings, really high reviews. I've seen a lot of people really enjoyed it. So I am excited to read that one, but this one was just okay. I didn't love it, but I didn't hate it either. So, and the last book that I'm going to talk about this time is Cersei. This is by Madeline Miller, and I gave this one 4 stars. I read Song of Achilles and gave it 5 stars. I absolutely loved it, and the one thing that I will say about Madeline Miller is, oh my god, this woman can write. The writing in this book is so incredibly gorgeous. favorite part of the book, hands down. But this is a book that, once again, we're like in the realm of mythology, and we are following Cersei. And she was a figure in mythology that I was not very familiar with at all. But honestly, this is a character study to Cersei, like, in who she was. And subsequently, there is no real plot. Like, things happen, but it's not the point of the book. It's just, it's literally a character study. There's not really much pushing the story forward, you know? So while the writing was beautiful, and honestly, that's one of the biggest reasons that I got 4 stars for me, there just wasn't a lot happening. So like, if you're expecting to read this and it to be like this fast paced, like, you know, crazy book, do not go into this expecting that, because that's not what this is. One of the things that I would actually really love to see from Madeline Miller is like a novelization of the Iliad, or a novelization of the Odyssey, or like a part of it or something. I feel like that's something that she could write beautifully, and I feel like there would also be like a little bit more plot involved in it as well. Reading this, and the same thing with Song of Achilles too, after having read the Iliad, I can definitely see like the influence that she gets like from the original text and everything, which I can really appreciate. But oh my God, like I cannot say enough about this woman's writing. It is so beautiful. There's like these gut punches of lines, and I loved that about it. And again, that's the reason that I got 4 stars. But if you like mythology and you're really into character-driven books, then I would definitely give this one a go. And that's all I have for you guys this time. So I'll see you guys in the next section. Hi, I'm filming, so I figured I would do a like vloggy session so that I could talk about some more books that I have finished this month. So first thing, I listened to Distrain by Guillermo del Toro and Chuck Hogan on audio. I didn't really know what this book was about whenever I went into it, and for some reason I thought, because it's called like Distrain, honestly I thought that it was gonna be some, you know, like otherworldly disease or like parasite or something that, you know, like takes over people's brains, and like that's what I thought that it was gonna be, and it wasn't that. And I don't know, like, because I never watched a television show, so I didn't really have like any frame of reference there. I was extremely disappointed by this book, first of all, let me tell you. So I definitely feel like it was written like they knew that it was going to be a screenplay at some point. So like the writing in general just wasn't very strong, and again, like it wasn't what I wanted it to be. It ended up basically being like a vampire book, and I was kind of pissed off by that. And like it goes into like vampire lore, and they still are making it seem like it's, you know, normal vampires. You have like a character who's very like Van Helsing-ish, you know, or whatever. You know, they wanted it to be like this parasite, but they didn't have like any explanation from the parasite. Like, I don't know, it wasn't what I wanted it to be, and I feel like it was poorly executed as well. So I ended up giving it 2 stars. Like, I did not like it. I was really pissed off whenever I finished reading it. So I went from that, and I had some booktube friends that wanted to do a buddy read of the Kiss Quotient. And this has been a book that's been like super hyped, and y'all know romance and like contemporary is not really my genre. I don't really have a lot of that on my shelves. It's not something that I usually read. Again, not that there's anything wrong with it. And y'all, I loved this book so much. I ended up giving it 5 stars, I think, because I didn't really have any expectations going into it. It's almost like this reverse Pretty Woman scenario. You have a professional woman who actually is on the autism spectrum, and she's not good with relationships, and of course her parents are like pressuring her, so she ends up hiring an escort to kind of like help her get better at that kind of stuff, and the plot kind of progresses from there. But I loved Michael and Stella together. I thought that their relationship was just the cutest. Of course, you have like your standard miscommunication between characters, and I don't know, I thought that the characters themselves were like really well developed. I do feel like the ending was a tiny bit rushed, but overall, like, I really loved this book. It is own voices, and so I feel like the representation of someone with that level of autism was very authentic, and it was never done in like a negative connotation or anything. So overall, like, I really loved it. If you enjoy romance at all and you haven't picked this book up, like, you really need to. It was so good. So the next book that I picked up, I went back into my thrillers and picked up The Wife Between Us. This is by Greer Hendricks and Sarah Pekkanen, which, in my experience, reading a book that's written by two authors, you can usually tell the two distinct voices, and honestly, I didn't get that from this. It felt very cohesive and like one style of writing, and I did really like that. And I have to tell you, when I first started reading this book, I'm like, here we go, like, this is another generic thriller, like, why do I keep doing this to myself? Okay, like, this book took some twists and it took some turns, and by the end of it, like, it went in a totally different direction than I thought it was gonna go, and I really enjoyed it. There were a couple things that I didn't like. The switching of the perspectives throughout this book kind of made me a little bit confused. I get the reason that it was done, but I don't know, it wasn't very seamless. And so, like I said, I ended up feeling a little bit confused at a couple different points. Huge trigger for domestic violence and emotional abuse. So that's a thing. If that's something that's triggering to you, no, don't do it. But as far as like a thriller goes, I ended up giving it 4 stars. I ended up really liking it way more than I thought I was going to whenever I first started reading it. I got about 35–40% of the way through before I was like, oh, okay, this is where we're going with this. And I was concentrating so hard on certain aspects of it that I missed where she was leading, or where the authors were actually leading us. So again, I enjoy that. A lot of times with stuff like this, it's really obvious. It's like, oh, I wonder what's gonna happen next. And again, so they duped me and I was happy with it. So, and the next book that I finished is actually housed in this thing right here, and it is Rage by Richard Bachman, or Stephen King, if you prefer. I ended up rating that one 3 stars. Rage is about a young man who takes his entire class hostage, basically talking about a school shooter. It is one of the books that is currently out of print. Stephen King took it out of print a long time ago. You can really actually only find it in bind-ups of the Bachman books and only certain versions of it. And like, I looked for a paperback copy of just Rage and it's like thousands of dollars on eBay. Honestly, I am still trying to like kind of articulate my thoughts on this one, because I just finished it last night. Well, technically this morning. I just finished it this morning, and I'm still trying to figure out exactly how I feel about it. The jury's still out. Like I said, I rated it 3 stars because it wasn't like terrible, but it wasn't my favorite either. I don't know, I feel like I still need to like really sit down and think about it. So what I'll do is, whenever I actually write my Goodreads review, I'll post that in the down bar below, because that will be done by the time this video goes up, a little bit more articulate. And then obviously, you know, because this is going to be part of my King Chronicles, I will also post a discussion video about this book as well, if you are interested. So that's a thing. Okay, that's all I have for this particular section. So I'll see you guys soon. Hi friends. I'm here with what's probably gonna be in my last like vlog style clip, but I've got 5 books that I need to talk about, 2 of which I actually finished today. So the first book that I finished is Everything That's Underneath. This is by Christy DeMeester. This is a short story collection. That's what all the tabs are. She's extremely atmospheric in her writing style. Very creepy, and I love her writing style, but like I have to be in a certain mood for it. Overall, I gave this collection 3 stars. There were some short stories that I really loved, like the opening short story. I loved it. Like, it really set the tone for the whole thing, and then there were other ones where I was like, what? I think that I liked all of them. It's just some of them were a lot stronger than others. So I believe that she has a full-length novel that I would really like to read. I also really enjoy the cover art here. And I also really enjoy the back illustration. Like, isn't that so fucking creepy? Next one that I picked up was Horror Store. This is by Grady Hendrix. I did talk about this one in my horror TBR, which has gone up by now. This is the one that's about like the kind of IKEA store, and they actually talk in the book about how like it's a blatant ripoff of IKEA. And I really liked this one. I gave it 4 stars. It's, you know, definitely like a haunted house book, kind of like a ghost story. You have a lot of like the traditional haunted house tropes in it, but it's still really fun. It's almost like satire when it comes to like retail life and working in retail. And for those of you that don't know, I do work in retail, and so I found myself laughing at several of the, you know, things that were said in this book. But I really enjoyed it. It wasn't anything too over the top, and like I said, like it is a little tropey, but I think that it's supposed to be. Like, it's just fun, you know. You're not gonna come away from this like scared out of your mind. It's really just fun. So I definitely recommend it. And if horror isn't something that you usually read, like, I feel like this is a good one for you to like start with. Next book is Unburied Carol. This is by Josh Malerman, and I did read another one of his books earlier this month, Black Mad Wheel, that's what it was. And I was very underwhelmed by it, and I ended up giving it 3 stars. This was something that was totally different. It was very like Old West vibe, but it's about a woman named Carol who goes into these coma-like states where like essentially most people would think that she's dead, but she's not actually dead. And you know, sometimes it can take her a little while to come out of them. And so like her biggest fear is being buried alive. Well, the title is called Unburied Carol, so I'll let you draw your own conclusions. But I enjoyed this one. I didn't love it. I really enjoy Malerman's writing, but I think that, and I hate to like put him in a box like this, but you know, I loved Bird Box so much, and like I loved the thrill of that book and like the tension, and I haven't gotten that with any of his books since then. I don't know. I don't want to say that I'm like going into all of his books thinking that I'm going to get another Bird Box, because like I know that that's not going to be the case. I don't feel like his books have been like as strong. Again, not that this is a bad book, because I did still enjoy it. It wasn't my favorite of the month. I rated it 3 stars, but you know, it wasn't terrible. In this particular one, I really liked the setting. I really liked the time period in which it was written, you know, kind of like that Old West thing. I did really enjoy that, and I thought that it was very well done. And there were like some suspenseful points or whatever, but yeah, I liked it. It was okay. Wasn't my favorite, but I would recommend reading it. So the next one that I picked up is Dusk or Dark or Dawn or Day. This is by Seanan McGuire. I wanted something fast. I read this in like 2 sittings or whatever, and it's still like kind of horror-ish, and I won't go like into detail of the plot. I just love Seanan McGuire's writing style so much. Writing is top-notch, and I did really enjoy the story. I really enjoyed, you know, it's about ghosts, okay, and some of the like mythology, I guess you could call it, or legends or whatever, surrounding ghosts, and that aspect was kind of like right up my alley. I know a lot of people that have read the Wayward Children's series, which is like, it's fantasy, but it's like darker fantasy. It's not necessarily horror, whereas this is a little bit more geared towards horror. So right up my alley, versus somebody who's like strictly fantasy reader, they may not, you know, enjoy it as much. And from what I've seen, like that's kind of what I've gathered. So, but it is a super short read. You know, I liked the characters, and like I said, I really loved the idea surrounding the whole plot. So I did really enjoy this, and I gave it 4 stars. And so since I was like enamored with Seanan McGuire's writing at the time, as soon as I finished that, I went ahead and I picked up Beneath the Sugar Sky, which is the 3rd installment in the Wayward Children's series, and loved this one as much as the first 2. And in fact, like, I don't know, I saw some people say that they didn't like this one as much as the first 2. One of the things I really loved about this is you had a main character who is overweight, and they talk a lot about what it feels like to be overweight. And as a plus size girl myself, I related a lot to that. You know, it talks about fat phobia and things like that, and it's not one of those where she's bigger and talks about how it sucks being bigger and, you know, wants to be skinnier the whole time. Like, she embraces who she is, and that's one of the things, you know, one of the reasons that she's trying to find her way back into her world is because, like, she belongs in her world, versus here where, you know, we're made fun of for being overweight. And there were just a lot of other, like, little points throughout the book where I would be like, yes. And it was just like one line where it would just like really click in my brain. And it's like, it's so true. It's like a universal truth, if that makes any sense. Love her writing. Like this is one of those worlds where like I never want to come up for air. I want to stay immersed in this world. It's definitely fantasy, so if you're not into fantasy, then maybe this isn't the one for you. But I love the series, and they have some really, really gorgeous covers. So, okay. So that's all I have right now. So now we're gonna cut to future me. So those were the books that I read in the month of June. Like I said, really good month, right? Have you read any of these books? If you have, comment down below and let me know. All of my social media links can be found in the down bar below. You guys know the drill. I love talking to y'all. As always, if you like what you see and you want to see more, make sure you click thumbs up and hit subscribe if you haven't already and you feel so inclined. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all next time. Bye.